Have you ever run into a client of yours at the grocery store? Or perhaps a friend of yours just wants to sit down and chat about all of their life problems? Well, multiple relationships are something that's going to happen as a therapist. Handling them the wrong way can lead you to some really icky ethical challenges. So let's talk about what you need to know to handle multiple relationships in an ethical way. In this video, I'm going to break down what are multiple relationships, ethical guidelines, common types of multiple relationships, risk factors, and best practices. Multiple relationships exist when a counselor has another relationship with a client outside of the counseling relationship. Multiple relationships can be a problem regardless if this additional relationship happens before, during, or after your therapeutic relationship with the client. There are many situations where multiple relationships can arise. Your car mechanic comes to see you for counseling. You are a school counselor, and the admin asks you to sub a class where the students, or some of them, are your clients. A client invites you to a really important life event of theirs. You go out to a restaurant and the server is your client. A client offers to trade services. Our job as a therapist is to know what to look out for. There's two key questions that you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about engaging in a multiple relationship with your client. Number one is this in the best interest of the client? The second question to ask yourself is why, out of all the options available, why am I considering either this counseling relationship or an additional relationship with this client? When it comes to ethical guidelines, this is really going to come down to what your board or association says about what to do when multiple relationships exist. Each board is going to have their own exact wording. I'm with the CCPA here in Canada, and here's what they say about multiple relationships. Multiple relationships are to be avoided unless justified by the nature of the activity, limited by time and context, and entered into with the informed consent of the parties involved after assessment of the rationale, the risks, benefits, and alternative options. Counselor therapists make every effort to avoid or address and carefully manage multiple relationships with clients that could impair their objectivity and professional judgment and increase the risk of exploitation or harm. When multiple relationships cannot be avoided, counselor therapists take appropriate professional precautions such as role clarification, ongoing informed consent, consultation and or supervision, and thorough documentation. So let's look at the unavoidable part. This is a more common thing that happens when counselors are working in small, rural, and isolated communities where you are very well the only therapist in the community. In small towns and rural communities, it's really going to be unavoidable to run into your clients as you're out and about in the community. Even if you're in a small community, here's a hard no. Number one, do not engage in a sexual relationship with your client. This also includes not engaging in any therapeutic counseling with an individual that you've had a sexual relationship with in the past. Another hard no is going into business with your client. This is simply a conflict of interest, and it's going to be really hard for you as a counselor to be objective, to be neutral, and it's going to impair your judgment when it comes to your counseling relationship. One common type of multiple relationship is the social overlap. This is when you run into clients out in public, at a restaurant, at a social event, you name it. As a routine, as a counselor, you need to be having these conversations with your clients as to what you're going to do when you run into them in public. In my practice, I simply tell them that I'm intentionally and kindly ignoring them if I see them out in public as a way of maintaining confidentiality. I remember the first time I saw a therapist, and I was actually really hurt that I saw her out on the street and she didn't even say hello. This was before I became a therapist, of course, but when I talked to her in session about it, she explained the why. So now, as part of my practice, I have that conversation so they know what to expect. Another thing that may happen is that you're going out to dinner and there is your client and they are working at that restaurant and you were not aware of it. What are you going to do? You got a couple options. One is that, especially if they're your server, you're probably going to have to leave. It's an awkward time to now have your client now serving you. It's not comfortable, probably for either one of you. So, your best bet is just to thank them, and just leave without having to explain the why you are leaving to anybody else that you're eating with. It's simply perhaps I'm not feeling well, something popped up, I have to go. Because if you disclose why, you are now breaking confidentiality. Another type of multiple relationship can be the professional overlap. Generally speaking, we don't hire clients of ours or former clients of ours. This has to be taken into deep consideration if you're living in a small, rural, or isolated community where services are very limited. These types of cases, I always recommend that you talk with colleagues or have supervision and consultation around each specific event. Another common type of multiple relationship is now the online and social media overlap. There are a few ways of how to handle this. Number one is to have a social media policy that you've clearly thought through what the ground rules are, and then sharing this with your client and having them sign it so they understand what the ground rules are too. Another piece around this is that you do not become friends with your clients. They can follow you if it's a professional page that you have, but you're not to become friends with them in a personal way. Your personal profile on social media should be very separate than your professional profile. Another part is that direct messaging, DMs, they are not an appropriate form of communication. None of that should be happening on those social media platforms, and that clients should be contacting you by the methods that you've provided, such as telephone or email. If you are a therapist that posts on social media, here's an area that you really, really need to be so careful with. And this is about sharing client stories, or maybe it's about sharing insights that you're having while you're working with clients. The thing is that oftentimes if we get these inspirational moments, we think of something, we'll share it as a post. But does that start to have a similar feel to it of what that client went through that week? If a client sees that post, are they going to think, oh my God, my therapist is talking about our session? That just feels really icky on the inside, and it's not going to feel good for the client, and it's not going to feel good as a therapist if your client ever brings that up to you. So, this is an area that you need to be deeply mindful of when you're posting online. Gift giving in the counseling relationship is always seen as a little bit of a not quite sure what we should do, but there's some pretty good guidelines that we can follow. So, generally, it is okay to accept gifts that are very small in nominal value and are not big, large, grand financial gestures. For example, receiving like a small box of chocolates during the holiday season would be considered okay, whereas receiving a jewelry, a gold watch, a bracelet, something like that would not be okay. One thing that we need to be really clear on is that we also need to take on the cultural context of gift giving. In some cultures, it is considered a very important part of the relationship. And as a counselor, we can actually do harm by rejecting the gift. So, in these cases, and every single one is individual, we have to think critically at each time this happens. We have to look at, is this going to impact the relationship? What cultures are involved? Is this okay or not okay? As a therapist, we have to recognize the potential for harm that's going to happen when we engage in multiple relationships with a client. The big risk factors when it comes to multiple relationships is the simple fact that it's going to impact our ability to be objective with that particular person. And when we cannot be objective, it's now going to compromise the work that we are going to do for that client. Being part of multiple relationships can also have this emotional entanglement. So, if we were to, let's say, engage in some sort of business relationship with a client, we're not going to have power differentials if they are not following through on their end of the deal or vice versa. We now have this emotional entanglement, which means that we can't think clearly when it comes to that particular client, and we're not going to serve them well. That's why when the emotions are all involved, this is where it's going to get icky and tricky, and that is why we avoid them. The consequences of engaging in multiple relationships is that a client of yours can report you to your association or to your board. And if you're found to be in violation of your code of ethics, then there will be a consequence of some type, and this will be decided by the individuals on that committee. For example, it can be from doing repair work, taking courses, writing a paper, all the way up to the loss of your license. Here are some best practices for managing multiple relationships. Number one is to have clear policies around informed consent, especially around social media. We want to have ongoing, continuous conversations with our clients if we are engaged in multiple relationships so that we are clear and they are clear on the entire process. Ignoring multiple relationships or not addressing the possibility of multiple relationships with your clients can lead to a fracture. If you are a counselor who has uncomfortability about setting boundaries and having these conversations, then it's your job as a therapist to do the work, probably in session with another counselor, about what's going on and how you can improve yourself, because this will keep showing up and it'll keep biting at you if you don't work through your own personal issues around this. Number two is consulting with your colleagues and your supervisors. This is something that is going to be an ongoing process throughout your entire therapeutic career because we're constantly going to come up against them. And we need to have that person that we can talk through this so that we are making an informed, ethical decision on what is in the best interest of that client. Number three is documentation. That is such a big thing. You want to document this throughout the entire process. Every time you have these conversations, we want to document it every single time. Finally, it's knowing when to refer out. As therapists, of course, we really want to help people, but we're not the only one. In today's world, where we have really great access to virtual counseling online options, this actually may be in the best interest of the client and for you is that they see another counselor virtually if that is going to solve the problem of having multiple relationships. The main thing that I want you to take away from this conversation is this in the best interest of your client? That is always going to be the key question. And with all of the options available, why are you choosing to have this either therapeutic relationship or having the outside additional relationship with that client? Always go back to that question. I invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Navigating multiple relationships as a therapist can definitely be tricky, but do you know what makes life more interesting? Having ADHD. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be a therapist with ADHD, or if you're looking for strategies on how to manage ADHD in your own life, then you won't want to miss this next video. I'm sharing my personal experiences and the game-changing strategies that have helped me thrive.